Here, it's Cradle of Filth. It got me through some pretty bleak times. Try track 4, Coffin Fodder. It sounds horrible, but it's actually quite beautiful.
What's up, dudes? So I'm back with another video. Now, Cradle of Filth, of course, have been booked for this year's Download Festival. They also have their new album coming out next week, so I thought, what better time to run through their discography, go through all of their albums, rank them, and just talk a little bit about the band in general. If you guys have seen any of my videos, you already know how much of a massive Cradle of Filth fan I am and have been for over 20 years now, which is actually mind-boggling. So yeah, let's learn a little bit about the band and then I will go through and rank their albums accordingly. So Cradle of Filth are an extreme black death goth metal band. They are all of those things and none of those things at the same time. Originally from Suffolk in the east of England, formed in 1991. The band's lyrics and presentation are influenced by gothic literature, poetry, mythology and horror films. The group is led by their main protagonist and singer, Danny Filth. They are also known for their incredible album covers, live shows and artwork, mostly featuring women's tits. Their style, creativity and look makes them one of the UK's most memorable and recognisable bands. They've been a mainstay of the metal community now for over 3 decades and have absolutely no intention of slowing down anytime soon. I think something that's overlooked and isn't mentioned enough for this band is their incredible sense of humour, whether that be in interviews, lyrics or merch, and they really don't take themselves too seriously, which makes me love them even more. Okay, before I get into the main albums, I'm just going to mention some honourable mentions, things that people will see, on Spotify in the band's discography, but they're not technically albums studio-wise, so they won't be included in the list, but I do think that a few of them are worth mentioning. The first one I want to mention is Goetia. This was supposed to be the band's very first album, but they didn't pay fees to their record label at the time, so the record master tapes themselves were wiped and the album never saw the light of day. Danny Filth in interviews has said he's quite thankful for that because he doesn't think it was very good. Vampire, I haven't put this one on the list because it's only 6 songs. I'd say it's more of an EP, but if you are a Cradle of Filth completionist, I think you should listen to it because it is quite good. From the Cradle to Enslave, this one only has 2 original tracks. The title track literally being one of the band's best songs in my opinion, so it's definitely worth listening to just for those 2 originals, but the other songs on there are re-recordings and a couple of covers, so not worth mentioning in the full run of albums. Bittersweets to Suck You By, this one is like a weird mix of EP, re-recorded songs, it's got loads of other stuff on it, but it's a really, really good listen and does contain one of my favourite Cradle of Filth songs, Scorched Earth Erotica. So if you want something to listen to that's got re-recordings, loads of stuff, but it's not an actual full studio album, this would be my recommendation out of the lot. It's excellent. Right, firstly, I just want to say that these are my rankings. I know how passionate us Cradle of Filth fans are, and I know that some of you won't agree with the way that I've ranked these albums, but please do tell me in the comments how you would rank yours, because it's always interesting to see where they would fall in other people's rankings. Firmly in last place at number 13 for me is the Manticore and Other Horrors from 2012. A weird one, this one. At the time the band were actually down to a 3-piece because James McElroy and Dave Pybus actually left the band, leaving Paul Allender to take up all of the guitars. Now it does have some actually really good riffs coming from one guitar player, but overall it's very forgettable. I think that the second half is actually much better than the first half. It sort of grows into itself a little bit. But yeah, they didn't really cover many themes. It's just about monsters, personal demons, and a lot of it is forgettable. So yes, it definitely sits at the bottom of the pile for me.
Flap.
At number 12, I've got the band's debut album from 1994. It's The Principle of Evil Made Flesh. Now, this is probably the band's only real true black metal album. It has some goth elements as well, but it really is the black metal version of Cradle of Filth in its truest form. Production wise, it's not great. Obviously it's very early for the band, so everything after this would start to sound much better, but I still think that this has some little shining moments, but really is a story of things to come. But there still are some awesome tracks, my favourites being The Prince of Evil Made Flesh and Black Goddess Rises. At number 11, I've got 2006's Thornography. Danny Filth clean vocals? Question mark. This is an odd one. They decided to sort of stick with the guitar-driven direction that they'd had on the last album, and yes, it does have some Danny Filth clean vocals on it. They're not bad, it's just weird to hear within a Cradle of Filth song his voice without any effects or without him doing the sort of normal vocal techniques that he would do. So it's not bad, it's just a bit jarring. The band were being pushed by Roadrunner at the time to go in a more melodic direction, so they were sort of experimenting with loads of ways to push Cradle of Filth forward. So in that way it's interesting, but even the cover was too raunchy for Roadrunner and they covered bits of it up, so it was really kind of sucking the soul out of what you'd expect from Cradle of Filth. It's missing all of that, you know, brutalness and gothicness that everyone sort of loves about the band and is in their DNA. So yeah, it comes off as quite bland, and it's definitely among the albums that I would go to the least. So not bad necessarily, it just really doesn't feel like a proper Cradle of Filth album and like they were able to give everything they could into it. So for that reason, it sits at number 11. At number 10, I've got 2003's Damnation and a Day. Currently, the only record the band have done on a major label, which was Sony at the time, which just shows you how big metal was in the early 2000s. Absolutely crazy. The lyrical content from this one comes from John Milton's poem Paradise Lost, which deals with the fall of man. It's an interesting listen, this one. It's got a more expanded feel. They included the use of a 101 piece orchestra and choir, so this album really does stand out from the pack in having a completely different sound and dimension to any other Cradle of Filth album. It's got good riffs and it has good songs. The main issue for this one is the runtime. It's a whopping hour and 16 minutes, so even for a Cradle of Filth fan, it's a very long album, and I think that that is the main problem with it. But it's a great experiment, does pay off on a lot of occasions, and there are a lot of tracks that you can pick out from the listing that do stand out from anything else that they've done. So yeah, I do like this one, just not as much as other stuff, and it's very experimental, but it is good, so it's worth a listen. At number 10, it is Damnation and a Day. At number 9, it's 2017's Cryptoriana, The Seductiveness of Decay. Now this one is based around loads of Victorian themes and lyrical content with their sort of fascination of the supernatural around that time, which does make for some quite good lyrics. They really do keep the momentum going on this one from the previous album. You know, it has the same ferocity, killer riffs, some incredible drumming. Overall, it's very well written. From a production standpoint as well, very good, top drawer. Within this period, they were just making absolute bangers production wise. It has its moments, but I don't think it's as memorable. I think this one suffers from being sandwiched in between two really, really good albums. Not that there's anything bad necessarily on this one. I just think that out of the three that came out of this time, Hammer of the Witches that came before it, of course, and Existence is Futile that came afterwards, it is, for me, the worst of those three, and yeah, sandwiched in between two much better albums. So yeah, I like it. I don't think the songs have as much of a long-lasting effect as those two albums, and there's nothing as memorable, but it does have a few good tracks. I would recommend from this one Heartbreak and Seance, which was a great single, Vesper Vespertine, which is another awesome song, and the title track, The Seductiveness of Decay.
They're musical geniuses. They're just instrumentally superior to everyone else, mate.
They're the best band on earth.
At number 8, I have 2010's Darkly, Darkly Venus Aversa. Now this one is a concept album about Lilith, who was theorised to be the first wife of Adam and a primordial she-demon. So it's got some great lyrical content that Danny Filth explores very well. From this one, the first thing you will get from it is Marthas's absolutely beastly drumming. I mean, it is just continuously non-stop all the way through this album. It's the only album to feature Ashley Ellion on keyboards and vocals. I really like her singing on this one. It's less operatic than previous eras have been. It's more, you know, standard sort of singing rather than having that operaticness to it, which I really like, and it's a shame that she only worked on this one album. From a guitar standpoint, it is just pure riffage. It might be the best Cradle of Filth album for guitar solos. They absolutely rip the solos on this album. Some killer tracks: Deceiving Eyes, Lilith Immaculate, and Forgive Me Father. They're all massively standout tracks. Out of the entire discography, this wouldn't be one that grabs people's attention. You know, it's not one that people necessarily talk about all the time or has any massive tracks from it. But I really do think if you're a fan and you haven't given this one any time of day, it's worth it, because I listened back to it and forgot just how good this album is. At number 7, I've got 1996's The Dusk and Her Embrace. So the band's second album. They do continue from the first with that sort of black metal edge, but it adds those recognisable sounds that we know Cradle of Filth for now. So, you know, the harmony guitars, the more goth sort of synthy elements. Danny Filth's vocals have gone from that black metal stage to what we know now with his more high-pitched, just Danny Filth-esque. So it really is the beginning of the band that we know and love now. Interestingly, this album nearly never saw the light of day. The band at the time were involved in a legal battle for rights and all sorts of stuff. So it was actually recorded a few years before, but didn't come out until 1996. An absolutely stellar album, one of the best from the band's early period. Just great, amazing, you know, trilled riffs with loads of sort of just gothicness piled on top. Loads of great songs as well. Funeral in Carpathia is one of my favourite ever Cradle of Filth songs. A gothic romance, and of course a Dusk and Her Embrace. This one is a must listen. I think even black metal fans will like it if they like a little bit of goth sprinkled on top. But yeah, stellar album, and for me it's at number 7. At number 6, I've got 2015's Hammer of the Witches. Now this one has some interesting content. This one is about the Malus Maleficarum, which means Hammer of the Witches. It was a document used in the 15th century for hunting and the persecution of witches at the time. So very cool lyrical content from this one. The band added new blood to the lineup with Ashok and Richard Shaw on guitars, and also adding Lindsay Schoolcraft to keyboards and vocals. This sort of inclination of new blood really ramped things up for me. This album is absolutely stellar from top to bottom. Marthas, of course, the drummer, always doing his best to just keep everything pumping. Danny Filth also sounds absolutely reinvigorated after the last 3 albums. It's just a perfect coming together, lightning in a bottle, new guitarists bringing loads of new flavour and just a different vibe. Songs that stand out for me from this one are Yours Immortally, Deflowering the Maidenhead, Vampire at My Side, and of course the colossal single Blackest Magic Put in Practice. Really recommend this one. It's fantastic.
You're just being a silly goose now, Mr. Filth.
Good job you had that name, eh? What other band could you have joined?
At number 5, I've got 2008's Godspeed on the Devil's Thunder. Another cool concept album, this one based on Gilles de Rais, a French 14th century nobleman and knight that lost his fortune and tried to get it back with alchemy and witchcraft. So once again, making for some awesome lyrical content for Danny to work with, and some really, really great and interesting themes. Everything on this album just blends so seamlessly. I mean, just absolutely killer riffs, just an absolute bombardment of just like classic, great Cradle of Filth with just fantastic production behind it. I feel like the best thing and most interesting thing about this album, of course, is the perspective on the male character. The previous album, Darkly Darkly, obviously with Lilith, it had a more female feel. This one, they even had a male choir to give it that sort of male sounding edge, and I just love that those two albums follow on from each other, two completely different characters and two completely different feels. It definitely has some amazing memorable moments and tracks, for me being The Death of Love, The 13th Caesar, Tragic Kingdom and Honey and Sulphur. I cannot say enough good things about this album. I think it's absolutely fantastic and you should go and listen to it if you haven't. At number 4, I've got the band's most recent album up to this point. It's 2021's Existence is Futile. I feel like this one brought back some of the things that were missing on the previous album, The Seductiveness of Decay. That one was, you know, quite trilly. The songs were quite long. They felt just that little bit overblown. This one does not have that problem at all. They literally get straight to the point. Even the slightly longer songs in this just feel like they're not dancing around at all. They're just like, hey, here are the riffs. Here are the absolutely catchy melodies that we've got all the way through this album. We're just going to bombard you with them throughout the entire thing. This one got critical acclaim from both the fans and the critics, and I can see why. Like I said, it's just a bombardment of catchy riffs, catchy vocal lines, you know, songs you can really headbang to, and I can see why so many people love it. Such a great album, and for me, it's at number 4. At number 3, I've got 2004's Nymphetamine. Crazily coming only a year after Damnation and A Day, which is insane, but their output in the 2000s was crazy. They put out 5 albums in that 10 years, so yeah, we got a lot of Cradle of Filth in the 2000s. It was pretty great. The band tried to make this album as simple as they possibly can, you know, getting away from all the orchestral stuff they've done before and just saying, listen, let's write some great catchy riffs, let's write some great vocal lines, put some great melodies in there, have some fantastic drumming, and put it all together and just make a really fantastic Cradle of Filth album, and I think they achieved that. Weirdly, this is sandwiched in between 2 of their most polarising albums, being Damnation of the Day and Thornography. So it's just strange that this is like a diamond in the rough surrounded by those albums that aren't necessarily loved by everyone. But I do think this has some absolutely insane moments musically. All the way through it's great. But songs I would recommend from this one are Gilded... That's right, you heard me right. It's a great song. Nemesis, Obscene with Faust, English Fire, and of course the mega single that I'm sure a lot of you know, which is Nymphetamine Fix. The album is just absolutely full of bangers. It's one of Cradle of Filth's best, and I would highly recommend anyone to listen to it. I think you would get a massive kick out of it. At number 2, I've got 1998's Cruelty and the Beast. Now, this one is based on the Hungarian blood countess Elizabeth Bathory, so it makes for some very interesting reading if you want to go and do that separately. I could do a whole video about this one, it's crazy. The band added a level of epicness that they hadn't done up to this point. Danny Filth is near the absolute height of his powers. Vocally, this album is insane. The songs just feel massive. Although they feel like they've got room to breathe, they still feel, you know, nice and trilly and sort of almost just giving that little murmur to the black metal days of the band, but obviously with that added gothic and epicness. Weirdly, the band were very unhappy with the original mix of the album. It has been remastered since, and I must say that the drums were a complaint by the band, and they do sound far superior on the remastered version than the original. So if you are going to listen to this, I recommend the remastered issue rather than the original. Such great songs as Cruelty Bought the Orchids, Bathory Aria, Beneath the Howling Stars. This is just a classic Cradle of Filth album from start to finish. A great listen for old fans, new fans, and I absolutely love it from start to finish. Highly recommended. And it's my number 2.
I would describe our music as being brash, emotional, fast, twisted, colourful.
At number 1, I have the album from 2000. It is Midian. This one based on the Clive Barker novel Cabal, and it's also the movie Nightbreed, if you've ever seen that. That's also a really killer movie. This album is the most evil Cradle of Filth album. From start to finish, it is just an absolute bombardment of death style goth metal, you know, loads of haunting synths. Danny Filth's vocals on this album are absolutely insane and just take it over the edge. It just has so much atmosphere. The performances feel very angry, you know, everything really does seem to be played with like a level of hatred. It's quite mesmerizing when you listen to it. Time changes, horrid riffs, harmony guitars, sometimes changing from, you know, epic to like downright disgusting. This album has it all. It's literally Cradle of Filth turned up to 11. Some standout tracks for me from this one: Cthulhu Dawn, Saffron's Curse, Lord Abortion, Tearing the Veil from Grace, and of course the mega single that you all know, Her Ghost in the Fog. It's an absolutely bonkers album. It's a milestone for the band, what the band were capable of, what they could achieve, and just how dark and disgusting they could get. I guarantee you that if you listen to this album, you will get something from it. Even if you hate this album, you will get very strong feelings from listening to it. It's just fantastic, start to finish. Highly recommended, and it is my favourite Cradle of Filth album. Yeah, so there you go, guys. I'm sure from this video you can tell how much I absolutely love this band and talking about this band. I would love to hear what you guys have to say as well, if you agree or disagree with some of my comments and the ways that I've ranked the album. As I said before, I'd love to also know how you rank these albums as well, so put all those stuff in the comments and let's start talking about it. Thank you very much to my patrons who are on screen at the moment. Thank you very much for support me, guys. It's always appreciated. Once again, I say at the end of all these videos at the moment, I can't believe how much this channel is growing, how many people are subscribing. I mean, do that if you haven't. It's just all good things. The community we're building is insane, and now we're ramping up to festival season. It's getting even more exciting. So thanks for sharing this one with me. I've absolutely loved doing this, and as always, I shall see you dudes in the next video. You should go and subscribe to my channel, just because. Come on, subscribe.